In just 9 days' time, the UK will formally leave the European Union. Brexit Day is almost upon us.
So, what happens next, and what does it mean for all of us? To find out the answers to some of those questions, we've invited the man who is arguably the architect of the whole thing, Mr Brexit himself, Nigel Farage. How does it feel?
Unbelievable. I've been campaigning for this for 27 years, and for much of that time, quite a lonely journey. In fact, I thought I might become the patron saint of lost causes. And suddenly, as you say, we're 9 days away from something that is a major historical moment in our country's history. So, yeah, I'm actually personally very excited about it. I'm also pleased that the division that we've seen over the last 3.5 years actually is beginning to heal. We're beginning to find a lot of people who would rather we'd remained are now saying, do you know what? It's happening. Let's try and make a success of it. So I think we're headed towards a better place.
OK, so talking about that sort of gap between those people, there's a lot of people talking about how the moment should be marked, whether or not it should be celebrated. Do you think sort of Brexit celebrations are the best way to unite a country?
I think that this victory... I mean, Brexit was opposed by the entire establishment. 5 years ago, there was barely a single member of Parliament backing Brexit. No national newspaper a few years ago backing Brexit. It was just a few grassroots activists out there in the country, which I was leading at the time. And the fact that the will of the people has overcome the establishment is something to celebrate. It shows you, whatever its faults, we're still a proper democratic country. And that, I think, is something to celebrate. And look, I've got this party that I'm putting on in Parliament Square on the evening. This is not designed to rub anyone's noses in it.
Right.
It's meant to be upbeat, optimistic, fun. And I think not to mark this moment would be ridiculous.
But isn't it rubbing people's noses in it? If you are a Remainer and you're not one of those people who have got used to the fact, you vehemently opposed it, you really wanted to stay. Many of the young people in this country wanted to stay, wanted to be
And many
part.
young people wanted to leave too. It works both ways, you know.
So isn't it rubbing their noses in?
No, look, this is, whether you like it or not, this is happening. We are, after 47 years of being part of something that was called an economic community, then became a European Union, we've decided to become an independent nation. Now, I think we should celebrate that. And I now think a vast majority of our own people think, we're doing it, let's make a success of it.
So, what's the point now of the Brexit party?
Well, look, I mean, this time last year, it looked for all the world that a second referendum was coming down the track, that Brexit may not happen. I think general public disgust with politics, with politicians, you know, had reached an all-time low. And that was why I sort of came out of political retirement, founded the Brexit Party. It was a dramatic success, so successful. We won the European elections, we got rid of Mrs May, and Boris Johnson came in and almost word for word took the agenda that we'd fought on. So I'm delighted I formed it. What I'll do now, put it on care and maintenance, just in case they make a mess of it.
And do you think they are going to make a mess of it? I mean, how likely do you think you'll be called back
You know,
out?
in 2016, I actually believed that Mrs May was going to do the thing properly. I believed we were going to leave because that's what we were told. I was wrong. So I'm not going to close it down. I'm going to keep it there in case they make a mess of it. But I think the truth of it is that Boris Johnson knows he has got a big parliamentary majority. If he goes soft on this, he'd lose in 5 years' time. So I'm actually quite optimistic.
You didn't win a single seat, so, you know, what
Well,
power have you actually got?
Well, hang on. We won 29 seats in the European elections, and I think the Conservative Party looked in the mirror in June and July and said, if we don't adapt, the Brexit Party will wipe us out. They took every single one of our policies, and so much so that I stood aside in half the country to say, look, you know, you're doing the right thing, get on with it. So they're now making a series of promises. I will do my best to try and keep them to those promises. But I think the Brexit Party, I mean, history may say that it was the shortest-lived and most successful party ever.
It's funny, isn't it? Because it was sort of 9 days away and we're still not sure of what it's going to look like. I mean, all the way along, that's what people keep saying. How's it going to affect businesses? Will we need visas to go on holiday? What will happen to our border? I mean, there are still so many questions.
You can never predict the future in any circumstance.
But shouldn't you be able to if it's something we voted for?
No. Whether you stay in the EU or leave the EU, you can't predict what the economy will be in a year's time. You can try,
yeah, but we wouldn't have
be
needed
wrong.
visas or separate queues for passports and all that sort of stuff, would we? And we wouldn't.
Well, I very much
potentially have had lorries. Allegedly, you know, if you, this is what the stories that have been put around, that there could be lorries.
But this is, but you know, you listen to the president of the Port of Calais who says, provided the documentation is logged online, there will be no delays whatsoever. And what you're seeing with this, do you know, all through the history of mankind, the establishment, the status quo, those with power and money want no change. And their way of stopping change is to fearmonger that change will lead to disaster. The truth of it is, if you look even last year, even through the uncertainty, the investment coming into the UK in high tech, foreign firms now setting up in the City of London. Just this year, property prices up in the commercial sector, 5% in London in the first 3 weeks. I think there's a new mood of optimism out there. We don't want to hear all these negative stories. We want to get on with our lives. And I will say this to you. What Brexit means is we are now completely in control of our future. Whether we get it right or get it wrong, we are in control. And I think our opportunity then to reach out to a bigger, broader world than Europe, that's where our future is, and I'm very excited about it.
But people love their pets. We have talk about dogs all the time on this show. One of the questions that we get asked a lot on here is, you know, in 9 days' time, will people be able to travel with their pets?
Well, of course they will. And you know, we leave the European Union at 11 p.m. on the 31st. We then have many, many more months of sorting out the small detail. The big historic moment is in 9 days' time. You're quite right to say there's detail to be sorted. But hey, do you know what? We're living in the 21st century. We interact with Europe. We interact with the rest of the world. This is all going to be fine.
What about security? What about cooperation between...
Yes, I'm very worried about that because I'm worried. Our most important security sharing actually is with America, Australia, Canada, New Zealand. That's where we share intelligence.
Five Eyes.
Absolutely. That's where we share intelligence at the very highest level. And I think the truth in terms of Europe and security is we give them far more information than they give to us. And look, we're going to go on being friends.
So why were you concerned? What concerns you?
I'm concerned if we have to share all of our data with other European countries, some of our allies around the world will be slightly concerned, you know, about should we be sharing very, very high level of intelligence.
Wouldn't you expect to be sharing high-level intelligence with our closest neighbours?
Well, the problem with our closest neighbours is some of those countries have not yet made the full transformation from being communist countries to being functioning Western democracies. There are, you know, some of the newer wave of members in the European Union have problems with human rights, some problems with their own democracies. So, you know, the European Union itself, work with them closely, but we shouldn't be sharing our most intimate secrets. No, absolutely not.
So what happens with you now? What do you do? I mean, I know you've sort of
I'm a
away
celebrity.
from...
Well, you never know.
I'm sort of like, you know, you're going, you know, it's the sort of US presidential election. I know that's something that's appealed to you, sort of going over there to sort of
well, I will
that.
I will spend some time in the States this year.
Yeah.
I've been a Trump supporter, you know, from way before the time he was elected. I know his style means that he's not everyone's cup of tea, but I think he's doing a fantastic job as president. So I will spend
Currently
some time
going through an impeachment process.
Yeah, and I think it's very, very politically motivated. I mean, how what he did constitutes a high crime, I will never know. Well, it doesn't is the answer.
Climate change denier just said perennial prophets of doom.
Well,
heirs of yesterday's fools and fortune tellers.
Do you know, it's one thing to say we're all doomed, we're all going to die, and it's another to do something about it. And I think the fact the president yesterday got behind the global trillion tree initiative. Let's plant 1 trillion trees across the world. Let's try and deal with some of those problems rather than constantly wailing and saying disaster is about to befall us. Look, so
many people would say we were on the brink of the disaster that it is about to befall us.
And they were saying that in 1989 when the UN first put out there, within 11 years, it's all going to be a disaster. Look, I'm not saying we shouldn't be concerned, but I think to talk negatively the whole time without offering positive solutions is not the way forward.
So, I'm a celebrity?
I was just about to
I
ask
don't
that.
know.
Would
I don't
you?
know.
What would you do?
I
What
don't
would you
know.
do?
I don't
Which one
know.
would you do?
I don't know.
Well,
what have you been offered?
well, the Jungle have been after me a couple of
Have
times.
they?
They have.
Have
They
they?
have.
Are you
They have.
tempted?
No, because the Brexit thing wasn't done, and I thought I've got
But
to
it's
stick around.
done now.
It is done. Now.
It is done.
I'll
Oh, I think you'd have a few people voting for you.
Well, I'd be on every blooming trial there is, wouldn't I? Because the problem with having an opinion is, while some people love you, a lot don't. So
Oh, well, we'd love to see that for sure.
What about Strictly?
let's see what comes. Let's see what comes.
Can you,
it's not-
can you
I'm not
ice
gonna-
skate? Can you ice skate?
No, I'm not doing that. No, I'm absolutely not doing that. We'll see what life brings. Look,
Yeah.
I've spent 27 years. I mean, I was once quite normal. I had a business, a young family. I got involved in politics. This was my cause. I felt the European thing was going wrong. I felt it was a different thing to what Mum and Dad thought they'd voted for all those years ago. So I'm just going to spend a bit of time after the 1st of February just reflecting that, you know, a big chapter of my life is over.
And
so I'll take the time.
How is it for you when you go on your summer holiday to somewhere in Europe? I mean, are you welcomed with open arms?
Oh, gosh, if I go to Italy, people are queuing up to say, gosh, I wish we could do the same thing. I mean, this European project does not have support. You know, do the peoples of Europe want to cooperate, be neighbours and be friends and trade with each other? Of course they do. Do the peoples of Europe want an overweening bureaucracy in Brussels that now has a flag, an anthem, and wants an army, and wants to be a global superpower? No, they don't.
Thank you very much indeed for coming in today. We've got a piece of music we'd like to play for you just as you go.
Yes, you've won 10 mils for Cap.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.